Welcome back to another episode. I am so excited to have Sean Douglas, one of my personal mentors on just speaking, getting on stages, how to really have a presence in a room and not just have a presence, but also engage and create a sense of community and move people and transform them through your presence. So, a little bit about Sean. Sean Douglas is a US Air Force retired 3-time TEDx speaker, keynote speaker on resilience, leadership, team building, and team performance, and business and podcast positioning, as well as a 2 times best-selling author. He's the international podcast host of the Create, Launch, Monetize podcast from No Worth to Self-Worth show. Sean's why is that he overcame his own battle with stress, anxiety, and a suicide attempt, and is dedicated to empowering others to do the same. As the founder of the Success Corps and business positioning strategist, he works with entrepreneurs, speakers, podcasters to improve market positioning and find their category to increase profitability, reduce anxiety, ensuring their businesses thrive and reach their highest potential. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sean.
I'm super excited to be here. How are you?
Yeah, it's great. And it's been a while since we connected, and you've really been a huge source of inspiration for me on just speaking, getting on stages, being an online business owner and getting into that space can be a little intimidating. So, I'd love to just dive right in and ask you something you taught me, and I want to share it with the audience. How do you move an audience? Like if you had to just boil it down to what's the biggest thing you do that moves people to tears? Because I know you've done it over and over again.
Yeah, that's what most speakers always attain to do. You can talk at somebody, you can use your slides and become a death by PowerPoint speaker, but how do you actually consistently bring up emotions in people or connect with your audience in an emotional way that brings them from where they are to where you know they need to be? And a lot of times it's just by either asking questions or letting them engage with you in a very vulnerable way. So there's a very famous playwright called Tennessee Williams. And Tennessee Williams wrote a ton of plays. The most famous one is Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And what he was a genius at was starting off high, dropping the bottom out with a catastrophic event, coming back up the roller coaster with funny, laughable key moments that still pertain to the story, but it was in a funny way. And then rode that high for a little bit and then dropped the bottom out again. And it was a sad, depressing, like, no way. And then made light of that, rose back up. And so you can't leave people in your talk, you can't leave people like deflated. But there's a way that you can connect with people. I was talking to, there was a group in Utah. They were the school counselors. And I said, you deal with a lot of kids and you're always, in their business or asking them questions and all the things. And wouldn't it be amazing to know the history of the child or kind of like how they think or what they feel and whatever? And they're just like, yeah, I'm like, wouldn't it be great? I said, I can't wait for the world to meet my 6-year-old. And then I went into like how she almost died twice before she was even born. And then when she was born, there was complications there, and the umbilical cord was choking her, and like all the things that she's overcome, then had to overcome 6 months worth of this, when she was first born, and all these complications in the first 6 months. Is like, can you imagine what she's going to be in the world? Can you imagine the joy that she's going to give someone who gets to know her, and she's going to tell that story and go, wow, you've been through so much. And she's only 6. She doesn't even realize the potential that she has. And I said that to them, and you could just see them just kind of shaking their head and like, wow. And the organizer was like, I cannot imagine what you went through. I said, yep, but it's not about me. It's about that little girl who is now going to change this world. because why would she go through so many hard things right in the beginning of her life if she didn't have a story to tell and wouldn't create a platform to tell a story on? Right now, I'm championing her story, but I guarantee you when she's 10, 12, 14, 16, she's going to be championing her story. And you're like, oh, that's amazing. I was like, can you imagine if you asked her different questions like, what does she think, and why did you derive this way, or even better, like what made you think and feel and believe the way that you do? She could reference that story and be like, wow, that's powerful.
I love that.
That's how you do it.
You do that so well because you're just so good at going down to the gutter. And it reminds me of that Chinese proverb, I think it is. It's the depths of the darkness you can withstand is the height of your light. And you just have that ability because of your story of, what you've been through. So, you know, I think people are really hesitant to take people down because they feel like as a speaker, they need to be inspirational. And you're telling them go really far down there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
because then you can just tell a story. You could say I was in the fight. It's like when I speak to veterans, they get it. I can tell them I was in the trenches. We were getting shot at. We were doing these things and these things and these things. We had no idea when we were going to leave, or we had no idea who was going to come get us, or we had no idea, and then finally at that last moment, it's like trying to convey to somebody your feelings and beliefs and thoughts and fears and worries and hope and all this ball of emotion. You're trying to explain to someone what that ball looks like. It's blue with this little string, and it's like you have a ball in your hand. Just describe it, but you're describing it emotionally, and then they get it and they're like, oh, it's like, but then there was that one time where they came and got us, or we pushed our way through and we made it to the, and you see it in a lot of sports movies. They're battered and broken and bruised and everything, and then the coach is like pumping them up and they're like, let's do it, and then they win. But the power of proximity is where it really shines. It's the power of proximity that allows someone to go from person to person, emotion to emotion. That makes you an amazing speaker.
So I want to talk about this because I think, you're a really gifted storyteller. How did you develop
Thank
that
you.
skill and how can other people become more captivating with their stories?
Yeah. So, have you ever watched stand up comedians
Yep.
and the way that they say things? It's like the most minute detail, like something that you would never, you're like, why does this even, like, why are you telling me? Why does this matter? And then they come back to it towards the end and you're like, oh, that's funny. So, I talk about the story that at the time, she was about five, probably 5 or 6. She's 10 now, but she was 5 or 6. But she was climbing up a rock wall on the military base that I was stationed at. She was climbing up the rock wall. And the whole story is that she was climbing up the rock wall. It got really tough at the top. And she looks down and I'm like, it's okay. Like, you did so good. I'm so proud of you. I'm a really good dad. Good job, baby. It's okay. Come down now. And the guy at the rock wall was like, she can do it. Try again. That was so brilliant. And then he asks me what I did. And I was like, I'm a motivational speaker. Not a very good one, apparently. So it's that funny story, right? But the way I say it, you know, she looked down at me with the most feared look. And as a dad, like, what do you do? And you're acting these things out. So the way I said it just here was like, okay, here's the synopsis story. This. And I'm like, oh, and I gave the punchline, but in a funny way that would get a laugh. But if you saw me do it on stage, I'm acting it out. And so I put the audience like they're watching me do it for the first time, like it's happening 10 years ago or however many years ago. I'm putting the audience there with my emotions. I'm transferring my emotional energy to them. I'm giving it to them. Then I'm acting out. I'm like, it's okay, honey. You You did so good. Dad's proud of you, you know? And they're like, I would say the same thing. And then I ask them, like, right? Like, I'm a good dad. I did good, right? And I'm bringing me in, like, see what I did? Do you see? Do you feel? So that emotional transfer of energy is the art form of how you get people to go from one to the other, because every story is another emotional step and another emotional step and one more. So I talk about 3 stories, very quick stories. And then at the end, I package all that up and I say, here's my message. Boom. And I always tell them, my message for you today is that you have the powers to say, this is not how my story ends. You have the ability to turn the page and write a new chapter, just like my 6-year-old who turned the page and said, this is not how my story ends. And she, with her newfound hope given to her by the man at the rock wall, rose to the top, reached new heights, hit the buzzer. Everybody went wild, just like you. When you got promoted that first time and you reached new heights and you turned the page and you wrote yourself that next chapter after your promotion, just like that, and I said, just like this, you can do it. You can turn the page and write yourself a new chapter today. Today is the day that you say yes. Today's the day that you say yes to your new trajectory. Today is the day that you say yes to your new moment, to your new chapter, to your new beginning. Today's the day that you say yes. And it's like this big, like, let's go, rah, 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 like at a football movie, and they run out of the tunnel with their newfound hope given to them by the state collegiate coach. It's the same thing.
It sounds like you really take them home with like this clear call to action and
Yes.
really, because I think all that emotion can bottle up into, okay, what do I do with this, right? So let me
Yep.
ask you a question. I'm trying to really dissect all of this because there's so much that you do with these conversations and these, how do you, let's say you're in a meeting and you're supposed to kind of move a room, but it's not necessarily from a stage. How do you create that synergy and that community and get everybody connected? Because I've seen you do this and I want to hear more of what's going on there.
So there's 2 things. One, if it's a small, let's say it's a 10 to 15, maybe 20 person meeting. The number one way to do this is say, okay, I know we probably worked here for X amount of years or whatever. Or I don't know who you are, but everybody in the room may know who you are. But really, do they know you? Do they know exactly who you are? So here's what I want to know. I want to know your name. I want to know where you're originally from or where you were born. And I want to know one interesting fact that somebody may not know about you. And I do this all the time. And I did this one at a conference in a breakout session after my keynote. And it turns out that the lady in the front row has had a lifelong dream of wanting to salsa dance with her husband, but she's too afraid. She doesn't know how. 3 rows back. Hi, my name is so and so. I'm from so and so. I'm a salsa instructor. We were like, what? Oh my God. And so they connected and I was like, I need an update. I'm gonna hassle you. And 3 months later, she salsa danced with her husband at a club. At, you know, and
That's
so had I
awesome.
not done that, I wouldn't have known that she had this dream and that a salsa instructor was 3 rows behind her. I did this at an event, at a corporate event, and it had leaders and it probably had 30 or 40 people. It's probably one of the larger ones I've done this with. And so the bosses are kind of like off to one side. And it turns out that the owner of this company, family owned company, he's a guitar player and his daughter's a singer. I'm like, oh, that's cool. A couple people down, one of the other leaders was a drummer. And I looked at the guitar player and I was like, uh-huh. He goes, all right. A couple rows back, one of the workers also played guitar. He played bass guitar and he played electric guitar. A couple rows back, one of the last guys was like, I used to be in a rock band and I play the drums and I can sing. And I was like, are we gonna form a band here? Are you guys gonna go to band practice? Are we gonna get together? Like, we just form a band It was like right about the time that Step Brothers came out. I was like, did you all become best friends? It was a big laugh. And the guy turned around. He's like, everybody needs to see me after work. I didn't hear anything else after that. But how cool would that have been for them to form a rock group, just to hang out on the weekends or whatever? Or they go play some bars, in North Carolina, but you don't know until what's one interesting fact that people may not know about you?
I love that. That it's so
Second,
simple.
yeah. And the second way to do it is if you have three main points, just ask them like what resonated the most with you. This is good for pattern interrupts. If I say something like one of the talks, I talk about like what are you willing to do differently in your life? What are you willing to do differently? If every single time you do this one thing, what do you think will go different? Please, somebody raise your hand. And if nobody raises their hand, you say, who wants to go first? Please tell me what you would do differently. You wait like 5 seconds. All right. If nobody wants to go first, who wants to go second? And then somebody will absolutely raise their hand because it's funny and you broke the ice you know, and then somebody will say, well, here's what I'm thinking about doing differently. And you're like, that's amazing. That is absolutely incredible. And then you can do a clap, you can do a snap and clap, you can, whatever. I always say, I want to give them some love for sharing, but I want to clap once, snap once, and point at them and say, you rock. And then everybody's like, ah, oh, that's so funny, And I'm like, see how it makes them feel when you give a compliment, which goes into how will you connect? Everything I do is methodical. Every time I do the clap once, snap once, and say you rock, my third point goes, and how will we connect? How will we connect with people? How do we connect with our audience? How do we connect with people at work? We clapped and snapped and said you rock to that person. We emotionally connected to them, giving them a compliment. What if you did that every day? And then I go whole thing about connecting everything because I show it and then I tell it. So it's called show and tell. So I'll show you something. Here's your clap and snap, point at you and say, Rock. I says, I'm gonna tell you why I did that. Boom. And then I go into it and I'm like, oh, everything from start to finish is very methodical and thought out in my talk. And it's supposed to get a specific response. And if it doesn't, it's kind of like an online business. If this person opens the email, this happens. If this person doesn't open the email, then this happens. If the second time it doesn't open the email, then this happens. If they open the email on the second time, then it goes back to the first time. And so there's this chart, right? Well, in my head, there's the chart. If this happens, I'll continue this way. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure book. If this happens, then I'll go this way. If this doesn't happen, then I'm going to do this other thing. But we're always going to end up in this place.
Wow. There's your brain's like a working computer while all of this is happening. So I'm just
Yeah.
I'm just processing. So let me ask you this. Okay, so you've got a room of people. Have you ever had it feel like I don't know if I'm hitting with these people? Like, what do you do?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I was in Washington D.C. and I was teaching a leadership class, and I was teaching something called bottom up leadership, and it's something that I teach where like the lowest level, like you don't need a title to be a leader, and these are all like frontline people and associates and all the sales people or whatever. And so I'm talking to him, and I get maybe a couple head nods. I'm like, okay. So I'm talking to him, I'm doing my thing, and I went through like three different variations of what I was doing, and I'm like, all right. So I had slides, I put it down, and I was like, something is going on. I can't put my finger on it, and there's not a whole lot of engagement, but somebody here has something to say. So I'm not sure if it's the company or I'm not sure if it's, whatever. And nobody really said anything. And I'm like, I'm not going to continue until somebody tells me exactly what they're thinking. So it was like, we just work in a toxic environment and this isn't going to work. I'm like, okay, interesting. Let's expand on that. Why do you feel that way? And then as everybody started chiming in, because then I created that safe space, which I thought I already did, but I didn't. So having awareness and recognizing that maybe I need to pause and find out what's resonating with each people, with each person, right? And so as we got through, it found out that this one person was the cause of all the problems. And that person was the one telling everybody that they needed to go to training because they're the problem. When in
Wow.
fact, everybody in the training said that guy's the problem. So I talked to the lateral leader, right?
Mhm.
That person's equal. And I said, here's the feedback I received. I think he should come through the class. I was, oh no, he's not going to go. And I was like, well, then he needs to be fired. I don't know what else to tell you. Nobody here thinks that this training is going to work because that guy's the problem. It's not them. It's that guy.
Good for
And
you.
so he came through the training the next day. It was a three-day kind of training. He came through the training, and I specifically, because I knew who the guy, I knew his name and all the things. I specifically used verbiage that they in the first day used to describe this person. If you ever have that misogynistic male that's in your frontline leadership, or you have somebody who's disconnected from their employees, or they're just not emotionally connected. That's huge, because that's what they said. They were like emotionally disconnected. I'm like, ooh, that's a good one.
Wow.
So he's emotionally disconnected. And I used all the verbiage, and people come up to me was like, thank you so much. And not only did they trust me, but now he's heard it from somebody else. And the guy that I talked to at the first day, the lateral supervisor who hired me, sat through on the third day and goes, this was very eye-opening. Like,
Wow. That's awesome.
that's what I'm paid to do.
Good for you. You're like, I'm not going to be satisfied with a brick wall, right? Talking at a brick wall.
Yep.
Okay. So I know we've got probably like 10 more minutes. So I want to ask about the idea of the fact that it feels like everything's already been said, right? So how do you position it as new or exciting or fresh when you're doing a talk or a presentation?
You're new and exciting and fresh. You and I, okay, so I could give a 2-sentence response. Anybody can give like a 2-sentence, like, let me just pull something from a movie or pull something from a book or whatever. And I could read it and you would read it and it would be totally different. I would emphasize certain things. You would emphasize certain things. So everybody's like, man, how do I stand out? You stand out. Not every person's the same. Like, look at the actors. Tom Cruise and Samuel L. Jackson do things very differently. They've both played police officers. They've both played military people. They've both played, in courthouse movies, right? And they've both done it differently. So what do you do? What do you do differently? So that's the most compelling question that you need to ask yourself. How am I going to do this different? And there's a lot of remakes of songs.
Yeah,
How do they do it differently? You add your own flavor.
exactly.
You are the one who is new, fresh, and exciting. A lot of companies have hired speakers for years on resilience, on leadership, on team building, on customer service, customer experience. They've had them all, but they're going to keep on adding leadership speakers, team building speakers, customer service speakers, because they're always going to say something different. They're always going to say it in a different way. That's the differentiating factor. You are the differentiating factor. Bring your flavor to the talk. Bring your flavor to whatever it is that you're going to say, do.
I love that. It's just you have to believe that you have a unique perspective and a unique energy and personality, right? Okay.
That's it.
So what is the question I didn't ask that you wish I would ask?
This question. I absolutely love this question because there's so many different things. And the question that I am kind of asked probably 50% of the time when talking about like this one topic, like how do you connect with an audience, and and you would think it was like, well, what am I not supposed to do? It seems like what's the shorter list? The things I should do or the things I should not do, or where should I go and where should I not go? The question that needs to be asked is, what are you willing to do more of? As a business owner, what are you willing to do more of than someone who is in the same space doing the same thing as you? As a speaker, what am I willing to do more of? As an employee, what are you willing to do more of? And everybody always wants to stand out, but this is the question that needs to ask. What do I do more of than anybody else? So as a speaker, do I go into more story details? You said I'm a very good storyteller. I appreciate that. What am I willing to do more of? Tell more stories, tell more details. Audience engage, not be a death by PowerPoint speaker. The number one question that everybody needs to ask themselves every day. As a wife, what am I willing to do more of? As a husband, what am I willing to do more of? As a daughter, sister, employee, boss, leader, trainer, speaker, podcaster, business owner. Go through the labels. What am I willing to do more of than anybody else? As a parent, what am I willing to do more of? As a, with what you do with career professionals, what am I willing to do more of than what anybody else has ever done? That sets you apart. That gets you recognized. That gets you referred. That gets you recommended.
I love that. It's going hard on what you already are flowing naturally towards.
Correct. And what you, in your proximity, naturally flow. What flows out of you, what you say, your mannerisms, your energy. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You have already been invented. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You just flow. And once you get into the flow, that becomes your flow.
All right. Well, I do have one question for you because I know you've helped so many people get on stages, master their talk. You've done it a lot, but what impact that you've had on whether it's a person, a business, just that you're most proud of?
Oh, wow. I had helped one of the people that I worked with. She's a podcaster, amazing speaker. I helped her get on 2 TEDx stages, and her talk has over 100,000 views by now. Another one's fairly decent, 30 or 40,000, views on that one. That was an amazing accomplishment for her. Okay. So we launched a podcast years ago with a guy. This is just so crazy. We launched a podcast called 86 on the Fly. It was an amazing podcast. So it combines, I need to 86 the shrimp. That means in a restaurant, we have no more. We're done. 86 it. We're done. On the fly means you forgot to make this one dish. I need it made right now. It jumps the line. I need it on the fly. If they're like, hey, you put gravy on the potatoes, I need potatoes on the fly, no gravy, right? So we put 86 on the fly, right? It was a restaurant podcast and it was hilarious. And it was supposed to highlight all the goofy stuff that goes behind the scenes, kind of like the movie Waiting with Ryan Reynolds. But it was like a podcast of the restaurant business. We talked about managing all the things, right? One of the co-hosts of this podcast got fired for being a co-host on this podcast because of the things that he was talking about. He was giving away trade secrets, all the things, right? You would think like, oh my gosh, like that's terrible. No. He went on to open his own restaurant and is doing multiple figures of sales and everything because he's so brilliant. And the owners wouldn't listen to him. And he would talk about this. He's like, man, I got so many ideas. And he did the podcast and then got fired. Wow. And now he's super successful beyond his dreams. And so by him doing the podcast, it allowed him to free speak, which then allowed him to get out from under the weight of the owners who just wanted it done their way and they would never listen to his ideas. He incorporated his ideas. He has one of the most successful restaurants in Dallas, Texas.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I'm going to Dallas. What's the restaurant, if you don't mind me asking?
The Grove.
The Grove. Okay. I'm going to look that up. Fascinating. Well, thank you so much for all the gems. How can people connect with you if they want to learn more about what you do, how you can help them?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is the Success Course, CORPS. All of my videos and social media handles and all the things are all up on the website. Go check it out. Go check out our podcasts. Subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. It's very important that you subscribe and then listen all the way through. It's how podcasts get ranked. And then we've got podcasts on our homepage, and you can come check out our podcasts and subscribe to those. And join us on social media and send me messages, and I'll make sure to respond.
Thanks so much, Sean. Really appreciate it.